Hello and welcome to our thought for the day. The creation story is perhaps one of the most controversial stories in the Bible. And the debate seems to be mostly about how it is to be understood. Is it to be taken literally? Is it describing a bit like a reporter what exactly went on and in which order? Or is it a myth which has basically nothing to do with historical reality? The argument does become quite heated at times. It stands in the bigger context of science and religion and asks if the two can be reconciled or not. I don't know where you stand on all of that, or if you're at all interested in this discussion. In the last few weeks, I've spent some time looking at the creation story again and rediscovered how fascinating it is. Can I invite you to take just a few minutes and think about what the Bible's creation story is actually saying? What does it tell us about the beginning of the world, about human beings and their role in the world, and about Creator God? And maybe there's a clue that itself wants to give us of how it wants to be understood. The Bible actually talks about creation in many different places, but the main stories are found in its very first book at the very beginning, in Genesis, in chapters 1 and 2. And there are actually two accounts, not just one, and they differ quite a bit. Let's look at the first one first. In this first story, we hear how God makes the world in 6 days and rests on the seventh when everything is complete. What's interesting here? I can only pick out a couple of points because we haven't got much time. God himself is already there. Other creation stories from the ancient Orient tell us how the gods came into being themselves and were basically made out of the same stuff like us. In the Bible, God has no beginning. Another interesting fact is that he doesn't start things completely from scratch. There's already a formless and empty and dark space there to begin with, and the deep waters are there. It's a space without shape. It's very chaotic. It is scary. How this space came into being, the Bible doesn't tell us. It leaves it open. However, God's Spirit is hovering over the surface of those dark and scary waters. He's already there. God then makes the world simply by speaking and by separating things. Let there be light, he says, and there was light. He separates the light from the darkness. He separates the waters from the heavens, that's the rain clouds, from the waters below, which is the sea. He orders the waters of the sea into certain places and creates dry land. He simply speaks and plants and animals come into being. He makes the sun, moon, and stars. Interestingly, in other religions of that time, these are all gods. In the Bible, they're just lights in the sky. Right at the beginning of the Bible, we hear that God is powerful, that he has an unmatched authority. Just by using words, he can bring a formless and chaotic and scary place into shape. He can make it into a place where plants and animals can thrive, and he's pleased with his own work. Again and again it is repeated, and God saw that it was good. It was a good start. He works methodically. I know quite a few people who are creative in chaos, or who create chaos as they work, and I'm a bit like that myself, I must admit. When I work on something, my desk is full of books and scraps of paper with notes on, and it doesn't look very good, I must say. The way the Bible describes how God made the world is different. He has a plan. He creates a space fit for life and fills it with living things. Our planet has the absolutely perfect conditions to make life possible. That's so amazing. Have you ever wondered about that? Finally, on the last day, God makes human beings as male and female. Together, they're made in his image. There's no hierarchy between male and female, not even in the second creation story, a chapter later, where the woman is made out of the man's rib. They are made equal and complementary. This is quite extraordinary if you think about the Bible's context with its patriarchal culture where men dominated women. The overall authority is with God, and he delegates it to the human beings to master the earth and keep it in good order. He delegates it to man and woman alike. A job that we are all too aware we've made rather a mess of when we look at the state of our planet. This story from Genesis 1 paints God as a sort of master builder working to a plan. The other story in Genesis 2 paints him more as a gardener or craftsman, planting the paradise garden of Eden, being hands-on and getting his hands dirty. This is very special. In the creation stories of other religions in the ancient times, lesser gods do the dirty work. They cannot imagine the God in charge to be involved with mud or any sort of material stuff. The God Genesis talks about doesn't mind that at all, and one day he would decide to be a human being and walk the earth and work with his hands himself when Jesus came. He's not a remote God, he's a deeply involved God. Again, in this story, he starts with a bare landscape, and the text is not interested where that came from, but then he first creates a human being from soil before he goes on to make plants and animals. Humans are made from the ground, and their job will be to serve the ground. Genesis 1, the first story, emphasizes that human beings have to master the earth. Genesis 2 adds that they are to do this as servants. We need nature, and nature needs us, it says. God forms the first human being out of soil, and then he breathes life into him. The human being then gets the task of naming all the animals God is making, and God steps back and sees what names he will choose. And by doing that, he delegates some authority to the human being, because in the Old Testament, if you can name something, you have authority over it. But as the animals have their opposites, their partners, the human being is by himself, and he cannot do the job he's given on his own. He cannot have children on his own, so he needs a helper, and God makes him that helper from one of his ribs. He lets him fall asleep, takes the rib, and he makes a woman out of it. And again, this doesn't say that a woman is inferior to a man. The word helper is most often used in the Bible for God himself, after all. Only after giving the human being a helper, he is described as a man and she as a woman. Together, they are to represent God in the world. Genesis 1 and 2 describe God as a God who's deeply involved with the world he creates, not with a God who's not interested. He gets his hands dirty. He's pleased with a good week's work and takes a good day's rest afterwards. He makes human beings in his image and gives them responsibility to care for his creation. They are to keep things in harmony and order. He has authority that is matched by absolutely nobody. Just speaking a word and it happens. I wish I could do that. He has the power to keep the chaos in check, to put it in boundaries and create a space where we can live and thrive. The people of the Bible knew chaos forces all too well. They knew war and violence and hunger. The major catastrophe for them was when they were defeated by the Babylonians and taken into exile. Reading the stories of the beginning of the world must have given them such hope in difficult times. If God had authority over the chaos at the beginning, he still has it now. He's the one to turn to when things fall apart. He can sort out anything. Today, when I think about the bad job we have made of looking after nature and after each other in the middle of a climate crisis and scary wars and international conflicts, it's good to hear again that God is ultimately in charge. The Bible says it's not by chance that we live on a planet which is ideally kitted out to have life on it. We have not come about by accident. The Bible says that the Creator God has had his hand in it from the beginning and that he loves and cares for it. He's here for us, wanting to help us to do a good job on this planet. And when we fail, we can ask him to help. If someone can deal with chaos, it's him. Genesis 1 and 2 have two different accounts of orders of what happens at creation and a different perspective on it. But the ancient editors of the Bible didn't seem to have a problem with that. They can live with these two stories side by side. Personally, I think these stories don't want to be scientific accounts that would have been outdated by what we've learned about the origins of our cosmos in the past few thousand years. But I believe that they want us to understand important facts about creation. And they give us these facts in the form of two different stories. These facts are historical. For example, that God was involved and brought order and created ideal conditions for life. And he made human beings to help be his helpers. But these facts are told in the form of stories, which work very well over the centuries. Whatever you make of it, can I encourage you to have a read for yourselves and be encouraged and inspired by these stories that have so much to tell us even now. Take care and have a good week. God bless you. Bye-bye.